The Canadian men's national team will play Venezuela on July 5th in the Copa America quarterfinals. So today we are going to get to know our new opponent. Venezuela has been in fantastic form recently. They were 54th in the FIFA rankings, but they've climbed up to 36 in the FIFA Live rankings. They're 18th in the ELO ratings, and they've had a fantastic start to their World Cup qualifying journey. They have a 2-win, 3-draw, and 1-loss record where they currently sit 4th place. And to kick off Copa America in the group stage, they went 9 for 9 in points, winning all 3 matches. And it's all really started, Alex, with their new manager.
Yeah, often when you see an uptick in form like this, it's always interesting to check the team. Like, is it, some generational young talent coming through, or, golden generation, a term that loves to get thrown around, maybe too liberal these days, or a new manager? And turns out, checked Venezuela, it is the hiring of a new manager, Fernando Batista. He brings some great pedigrees, an Argentine manager. He's coached in Armenia, interestingly. Had some youth experience coaching the youth teams there. And then, of course, he went to his homeland and coached some of Argentina's youth national teams. But then he made the jump over to Venezuela, first as an assistant for a couple of years, but more recently he was hired as head coach, as you mentioned, last March. And there he had some big goals. Because I think what's interesting with Venezuela is got some history of some pretty darn good players. And they play in a very competitive region. They've always been a competitive team, but there's two things that have haunted them that nearly everyone else in the region has had. They've never been to a World Cup, and they're one of 2 teams that have never won a Copa America, along with Ecuador. So for them, those were the 2 big accomplishments. And so far in World Cup qualifying, they're on track for the expanded 48 team tournament. And for them, they'll hope this Copa America, with what they feel is the softer side of the bracket, that maybe they can make that dream come true as well.
Absolutely. And a big thing right now and a big storyline within Copa America is the fact that Canada, their first ever Copa America, or Venezuela will be in a semifinal. And like you just mentioned, Venezuela has had a difficult time in this tournament over the years. So let's take a look at Venezuela's style of play. Now, throughout the matches and with the new hiring of the manager, they've played in the 4-2-3-1 system, where a strong defensive posture is a good opportunity for them. That's their strength. They struggle from time to time on the side with a little bit of a light press. Alex, what have you made to their style so far?
Yeah, an interesting thing standing out is just it's a very strong defense first identity. I think it's something where for them they've looked at their team and realized, okay, the good work starts on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's smart, because there's a few areas where they have some good quality right away. They have some good quality at center back. They've got some guys playing at a good level, good familiarity there. Then the real strength of the team is that midfield pivot. I mean, if you watch MLS, you'll know Jose Martinez of Philadelphia Union, one of the best players in the league. He's been an all-star in the past, if I'm not mistaken, an incredible player. But then the real piece, like Martinez, is a complementary piece, and that's because Yangel Herrera is coming off a ridiculous good season in Europe. He was with Girona, who, as we know, is one of the top stories of all the top 5 leagues. They ended up pushing, I think, finished 3rd in La Liga, and he played, 27 starts. He scored 5 goals playing in midfield for a club like that. Incredible. And then, of course, up front, there's a name that some might recognize, Salomon Rondon. He's an absolute unit. He's, he scored over 40 goals for this team. Everyone else combined has less than 40. Like, he's the offensive heartbeat of this team. So they've got some good pieces, and I think that Batista came in, saw that core, saw that identity. He was like, all right, defense first, solid in the middle, go from there. And I think it's worked pretty well so far.
It absolutely has. And like you mentioned, going forward, a lot of the play has gone through Salomon Rondon, who you just touched on, but also a name that a lot of Canadians would be familiar with in Jefferson Soteldo, who was obviously with TFC for a bit. It didn't really work out too much for him, but he's always been a big presence going forward for Venezuela. He's a tricky winger. He doesn't have a ton of pace. He likes to drift inside. He likes to make things happen. I know that you haven't been super impressed, maybe, Alex, with his tournament so far, but Salomon Rondon, for me, is the guy to keep an eye on. His form with Pachuca has been incredible, obviously winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup with them. He's brought that form to Copa America, and right now it looks like those are the 2 to keep an eye on. So looking at Soteldo, though, because that is a familiar face for a lot of these Canadians, what have you made of his tournament, and do you think he will be a big threat for Canada?
Yeah, he's absolutely a big threat, because he's someone where sometimes the process can be frustrating. I'm sure Toronto FC fans will have remembered that. It can be a lot of dribbling, a lot of cutting inside and speculative shots. But the reality is he's good for a couple moments of magic per game. And when he's on his game, he can be incredible. There's a reason why he was at one point wearing a number 10 on Santos, and why he commanded a huge fee to go to Toronto. So Venezuela will hope for that. Like I mentioned, the midfield is so solid. I didn't even mention Christian Cáceres Jr., another MLS link because he used to play for Red Bulls, but now he's in a top 5 league. He's playing with Toulouse. That's obviously a big opportunity, but they need some moments up front. So far, they've gotten this tournament a lot from Rondon. But Soteldo can be someone who can step up and take a game over. The way he can operate in the half space, cut inside, pick out some crosses. When I was watching Venezuela versus Mexico in particular, he had such dangerous moments when he'd get inside, find a bit of space. So Canada's absolutely going to have to be wary of a talent like that because you know what Rondon can bring. It's traditional, no-nonsense number 9. It's back to goal. He's going to want to bring the ball down, involve others. But if Soteldo's on his game, that could end up being a deciding factor because for Venezuela, you've seen it in this group stage. They've only allowed 1 goal. Defensively, they're going to be very much in the game. It's can they find the goals, and Soteldo could be key to that.
I do want to throw out a shout out to their keeper, Romo, who's been fantastic as well throughout these matches. Came out with a massive penalty save against Mexico pretty late in the game, which he was the man of the match in that game as well, and got them the 3 points they needed to continue to move on here to the quarterfinals. But now let's take a look at how Canada will match up against this Venezuela side. And Canada has struggled over the years to break down low blocks. Alex, you and I have been a big 3-man midfield. Having a number 10 in there, the lack thereof is a big reason why we haven't been able to do that. So how do you think we will deal with this low block? And do you think it's finally time to maybe see a Jonathan Osorio get put into this midfield? I think he's had a strong tournament so far, starting in the match against Chile. He came off the bench against Peru. I don't think he can do it in that kind of 2-man midfield role. I think he has to push further up. But if we're looking for creativity, looking for a way to have a player with that creative mindset, can maybe play that weighted pass, he's pretty much our only option right now.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing to watch because Canada's big Achilles heel for a while now has been low blocks. This is going back a few years now, but especially so, when you don't have a true 10, because that's where sometimes when you are up against a low block, you need someone who can pick that final pass, play between the lines, find that glimmer of space. And when you have 2 strikers on the field or trying to occupy defenders, get in the box, of course, we know David can drop in, but David's someone where he can play that killer pass, but that's not his game. He's someone where he's that killer action, that killer final touch. It is absolutely something to watch. I think it's no coincidence if, just because those few games are at the top of mind, the World Cup in 2022 and now this Copa America. 2 of Canada's best offensive performances were against Belgium at that World Cup and against Argentina in this Copa America. Believe it or not, by the statistics, by the numbers, their best performance in the group stage wasn't against 10-player Chile or Peru. No, it was against Argentina. It's because in those games, Argentina and Belgium, the game was open. They wanted to be on the front foot. There was space in transition. Boom, Canada hit. They probably should have scored more than the 0 that they got in both games combined. But against Peru and Chile, as you saw, especially, there's of course the argument of, Canada should have done better against 10 players. Absolutely, they should have. But what happened with those 10 players is, those teams sat back. They saw, okay, we're down a player. We'll let Canada attack. That ended up helping them, if anything, more than if they were playing aggressively. And I think a lack of a number 10, a lack of someone to break it down is a big reason why. So if I'm Venezuela, they've already been defending very well. There's no reason why they shouldn't sit compactly and dare Canada to break them down because we haven't seen a whole lot that suggests they'll be able to.
No, I 100% agree. We created a ton of chances against Argentina, and we absolutely should have scored. It was poor finishing, and obviously you look at the front two with David and Larin there. But in the other 2 matches, we created almost nothing. And if it wasn't for the red card in both of those matches, there's a good chance maybe we didn't get out of the group. So something has to change, and that's where I think Osorio could be the piece. Another big storyline around what Canada will do is Tajon Buchanan, who has obviously picked up a knock. We don't know right now if he's going to make it. He went to the hospital. So we're going to have to see what Canada is going to do there. Does that mean Richie Laryea may start down the right? Does that put Davies obviously still at left back? Liam Miller comes back in. And I really still want to highlight those 2 players because I really like what Liam Miller and Alphonso Davies did together in that first match against Argentina. Now, like you just mentioned, Alex, there was space to do so, but I still want to see them have another chance to do it together. I think Schaffelberg will be a perfect player to come off the bench. But the issue, and I'm curious to see what you think they may do, is Venezuela's fullbacks are very defensive. They're conservative, and that's going to probably be more difficult to break down. But if you have players pushing forward like an Alphonso Davies with those overlaps or underlapping runs, or maybe even an Alistair Johnston, that could be a really good opportunity to isolate those fullbacks and create opportunities for Canada.
Yeah, no, it's a huge battle, and something that really stood out is that Venezuela's fullbacks can push forward. I think their right back pushing forward actually won them the penalty against Mexico, but a big reason why they can't be as aggressive is that they just don't have very strong defensive wingers. Like Jefferson Soteldo, for all of his strengths offensively, it's not a defensive juggernaut. And they've rotated a few names on the right side, but most of their options, like a Darwin Machis, some of the other names that they've thrown out at right wing, again, they're a bit more offensively inclined. In fact, against Mexico, they threw in a third midfielder just because they were struggling defensively through what they were getting from out wide. What that means, I think Canada's big secret or key, it has to be the fullbacks. Because I think the wingers, it's going to be tough if the fullbacks are so defensive. There's rarely going to be space. Say it's a Liam Miller and a Richie Larea. It's going to be tough to find that space. What you're going to need, especially in Miller's case, if he cuts inside, Davies has to provide that overlap, especially knowing, okay, the winger might not track me. I can get some space, create that overload, get the ball in the box, and ditto for Alistair Johnston on the other side. So that's something to watch for, that the fact that, this is a point that we'll get to, Venezuela also doesn't have a lot of speed in transition. They're not, blessed with a whole lot of in-behind threat. It doesn't help that two of their bigger creators that we mentioned, like Rondon and Soteldo, also aren't the speediest guys either. What that means is Canada doesn't have to be as wary of the counter as they were in other games. They can push their fullbacks for, and they might need to, because that might be the best way to get some width in the attack. If not, Venezuela will do a good job of mucking up the back and, of course, the middle with their great pivot.
Well, let's go to that point right now. Like you said, they don't have a ton of speed. They have one of the best number 9s in this tournament when it comes to just hold up play. But if Canada does play that high line and is able to play to their style, and you see Cornelius further up the pitch, you have Bombito, and even if the ball gets in with someone with the pace of Davies and Bombito, they're pretty much covered. So how do you think that is going to really benefit what Canada wants to do? And I mean, could we maybe see a little bit of a change in shape, Alex, especially if we want to see someone like Osorio start? Maybe would it allow Davies to play further the pitch? Maybe Johnson does play a reserve role, and you have Richie Larea and kind of play in that back three. Could you see that as a potential option? We saw them do that against Peru. Or would you expect them to play a little bit more risky and only have the two center backs staying back? You have Davies and Johnson pushing forward, and then maybe Eustachio drops back a little bit more for coverage. What do you think?
Well, I think if you have Osorio on the pitch, I think it's option 2, right? Because then Eustachio can drop back, because Osorio can be the extra midfielder, and you can it almost could build up with like a 3 with Eustachio in the middle of the 3. Then it could be the 2, because it could be Osorio and Kone kind of playing off each other. Then, of course, Davies and Johnston kind of push up as fullback wingbacks. And then there you'd have the front 3 of Miller, David, and Larea. At least, that's a potential projected lineup, assuming you throw Osorio. Of course, if you don't throw in Osorio and you go Kyle Larin, that does change things a bit in terms of what that shape would be. In that case, I'd probably suggest more of the Johnston comes back and joins the 3. Then you expect the Larea and Davies to provide the natural width, and ends up being a bit more inverted. Either option, of course, brings benefits. Again, for this game, we're suggesting Osorio, but I think there's a scenario where the other option works. Although, again, as we mentioned, there are some questions of, what can David and Larin bring against a low block when they've struggled in the past. But no, I think the lack of in-behind threat only offers Canada flexibility, because they won't have to be worried so much of, all right, like, say this team has natural wide players that can absolutely hurt you, get in behind, burn you. They don't have that as much. And I think especially the fact that you have a Bombito there as kind of like cleanup crew. You have Max Crepeau, who can play a high line. I think Canada's high line will really benefit from this. And again, a lot of this suggests right off the bat, like, this feels like it's going to be a very cagey game. So, we won't be throwing out any predictions here, but 0-0, 1-1, there's a lot of elements to this game that suggest that's not an unreasonable prediction.
No, I definitely agree. And like you said, the low block, the lack of press from Venezuela, it can benefit Canada in the buildup. But like I said, like you said, I think Osorio would be such a key player. And it makes me almost wonder if Jesse Marsch, even if he doesn't take off Larin for Osorio, maybe he just keeps Osorio in there instead of Kone. It's one of the question marks I have for a team like this, who's probably going to have a ton of the ball. And if we do have a ton of the ball and it benefits them in the buildup, having the ball, and when Venezuela doesn't really press them that hard, how important do you think it's going to be for Venezuela's midfield pivot to shut them down? Because arguably, if it's not Rondon, has been that double pivot that has been so impressive for this team.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be very, very important. The fact is, the game could be won or lost in the midfield. It feels like, with what the quality that Venezuela brings. So I think for Canada, they have to be wary of what's what's happening there. And that's why I think an Ismael Kone could be very helpful, right? I think it's something where Osorio brought a lot of calm, a lot of composure into that double pivot on the ball, and I think that can't be ignored. And that's why he deserves, or at least he's been thrown into this conversation where he could deserve a start. But Kone is what he showed defensively, what he showed, of course, in possession. I think that could be key because you don't want to let that Venezuelan pivot take over the game. It feels like when their spine players are doing well, that's from the CBs to the midfielder to Rondon up front. That's kind of where they're at their best. So I think it's 100% something to watch, and I'm curious to see how creative Marsch gets. Another solution that you could throw out is they're playing 4-2-2. You could also throw in Osorio out wide because he has played there before, for Canada and for Toronto FC. Maybe it's something where if you want to keep Larin and David on the pitch, you could kind of end up building up in a 3-5-2 with Osorio tucking in to be the 10. You keep Kone Eustachio. That allows Davies to push up. Larea is one of the other wide players. There's some flexibility that Marsch could offer because I think, again, focusing on that pivot and potentially getting a third midfielder in there might be the best way to do it.
It's going to be interesting to see. This is one of the biggest matches in our Canadian footballing history. I mean, it really is. If we win this match, we're guaranteed 2 more. We have a semifinal, probably against Argentina, and then potentially a first place or third place match. So it's an exciting time right now for Canadian footy fans. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. Let us know your score predictions down in the comment section. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.